Just kind of go around. There we go. Good morning, Armin and Dan. I know you're there with
Morning.
your students and stuff. And sure, Dr. Gatewood. Dr. Snyder, good to see you. Good to have you with us this morning. So, um,
Morning, everybody.
good morning, Ken. Great to see you. Um, so let's just go around real quick before I introduce. Well, no, before I introduce Sarah, let me just have you go around real quick, and I'll just call on you and just have you introduce yourself. So, Charity, I'm going to go to you next. So if you want to unmute Charity, just good morning, Charity.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charity Bergio. I'm the Manager of Learning and Performance for Kaleida Health. I'm happy to be here this morning.
Glad you're here, Charity. Good. Tony, and you're muted, Tony. And you're still muted, Tony. Tony is still muted. Okay, Tony.
Yeah.
There we go. Tony, go ahead. Yep. Uh-huh.
Yep, my name is Tony Pagliaroli, and I'm a graduate of the great state of our Buffalo State University. Um, and yes, I have a practice called Bright Lights Innovations. I'm from
Okay.
Hermitage, Pennsylvania.
So we have Pennsylvania. Okay. Aline, doctor.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eileen. I'm from the Netherlands, the south of the Netherlands, and I work there as an anesthesiologist intensivist in an academic hospital. So I do a lot of medical educational stuff, and I just finished my master in creativity and change leadership at the University of Buffalo.
Great.
Yay. Dan, can you just unmute your mic and just say hello? I know you're.
Does this work?
Well, we hear you. That's fine, and I know we're kind of broadcasting on the screen. So
I'm a pediatric pulmonologist, and I'm here with two pediatric residents and a third-year medical student.
beautiful. Welcome, Dr. Sheehan. We've met Dr. Yates already, the mastermind behind all of these productions, who is just fantastic and very giving of his time. And David, we thank you so much. And when you're in town next time, to buying you breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All right. And Kelly, over to you.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I am the education manager for the Quality Institute at the University of Rochester.
Great to have you, Kelly. Great to have you. Armin.
Good morning. I'm Armin St. George, VP of Development at Kaya Technologies, where we develop interactive AI, author-controlled AI solutions for patient education and medical education as well.
Armin, great to see you. And Armin was on with his colleague for a couple of times last month. And Ken Snyder.
Good morning, everyone. Practicing neurosurgeon, vice president of physician quality for Kaleida, and director of health system science for four-year curriculum for our medical school. Honored to be here, and Sarah, absolutely loved your book.
Ken, I'll be texting you afterwards so we can get together for coffee. So
Sounds good, sir.
All right, friend. And Dr. Robert Gatewood, are you there? Aha. Oh. He's about to appear. Well, perhaps Dr. Gatewood will appear later. He is the mysterious Dr. Gatewood. So wonderful supporter, dear friend. And Sharon, do you want to say hello?
Hi, I'm Sharon Barron. I'm the manager for the regional perinatal program at Oshai Children's. Happy to be here this morning.
Great to see you again. This is fantastic. So, well, let's begin. And so I'd like to just introduce our wonderful guest speaker here. Sarah's bio is that she's an author, a speaker, and an entrepreneur who works in team effectiveness. She's been featured in Forbes, TEDx, and the New York Times. Great stuff. Sarah is the managing partner of the Foresight Company, and she leads a team of problem-solving experts. And they've developed tools to support team and leader effectiveness. And they've done this for a long, long time. Latest book, Good Team, Bad Team, has been featured in Forbes, TEDx, and Inc. So that's the formal bio. But the other bio is that Sarah is a dear, dear, dear friend. I've known Sarah for upwards of 25, more than that, 25, 28 years. Sarah happened to marry another dear friend of mine, Blair Miller. And so together they have three wonderful children that Cole is just about Maria's age, my daughter's age. They're very close. And so Sarah is a former student and now a colleague, and there's no greater honor than to be able to have a student become a colleague. And so Sarah, take it away. You're going to be magnificent. And so thank you all for being here. Thank you all for taking time out of your day. And Sarah, thank you particularly for taking time out of your busy morning in Chicago. So, ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Thurber, over to you.
Thank you, Raj. Such a pleasure to meet you, and such a pleasure to meet you all. It is exciting to be able to deliver word from the work and the research that we've done into the incredible work that all of you do. And I have structured this at first really as a talk, and then at the end would love to get some interactivity with you, with ideas or stories or incidents where you may have seen what I'm talking about with your own patients in your own practice, with your own teams. So let's launch right in. This begins when my first book, The Secret of the Highly Creative Thinker, came out in 2016. And I was standing in a buffet line at our neighbor's anniversary dinner when I met Dr. Dave, not his real name. He introduced himself as the chief of medicine for one of the largest hospital systems in Chicago. Seemed like a nice guy, smart, clean cut, kind of intense. And when it was my turn to introduce myself, I thought, oh no, I'm going to tell him what I do. And he's going to get that panicked look in his eye and fast walk his plate far, far away. So I took a deep breath and said, hi, I'm Sarah Thurber. I run a company called Foresight, which supports team effectiveness using a collaborative problem-solving system based in the science of creativity. And I paused and I looked. He was still there. So I kept going. And I've just written a book called The Secret of the Highly Creative Thinker. I figured that would do it. He'd be hightailing it across the room for sure. But he didn't. Instead, Dr. Dave looked at me with laser focus and said, I'd like to learn more about that. Do you mind if I join you for dinner? Unexpected outcome. So we sat down and Dr. Dave explained that he had a problem. Among his many responsibilities as chief of medicine, he headed up the hospital research lab. He could staff it with his pick of the world's top medical students, people with perfect scores, people with perfect grades, people with glowing references. And he would bring them into the lab, and some would thrive, but most would kind of seize up. These were good people. These were smart people. These were hardworking people. But in the research lab, where they were expected to sort of think outside the box, many of them responded like deer caught in the headlights. And he wondered, why? Now that question is right up my alley. You see, at Foresight, we spent the last 20 years studying cognitive diversity, how people approach a challenge and why they do it so differently. In our proprietary database, my team has gathered more than 6 million data points to help us understand how individuals can learn to be more effective problem solvers and how teams of diverse thinkers can solve problems more effectively together. As you all know, medicine is a team sport. It requires players to collaborate, to cooperate, and problem solve together. If doctors and nurses and patient advocates and other healthcare providers don't work together, you lower the chances of achieving your goal, which is to heal the patient. But how do you make sure those teams do work? And how can you make better teams with the people you have? Today, I'd love to tackle that challenge from the cognitive perspective and explore some proven practices to help problem-solving teams think creatively, work collaboratively, and deliver consistently positive results. So this June, I published a new book called Good Team, Bad Team. Roger is such a good little promoter. Thanks, Raj, which I co-authored with Dr. Blair Miller, the PhD kind of doctor. And also Blair is the co-founder of the Foresight Company and also my husband of 30 years. You can imagine team writing. It was a challenge, but we did it. And in the book, good team, bad team, Blair and I combine research in cognitive diversity with research in creative problem solving and research in team effectiveness to produce a sort of playbook based in research of how to make a good team. Given that you guys are the Buffalo Society for Creativity and Medical Education, I thought you'd be pleased to know that the research in cognitive diversity is based on the work of a fellow Buffalonian, Dr. Gerard Puccio, chairman of the Department of Creativity and Change Leadership at the Center for Applied Imagination at Buffalo State University, and a wonderful colleague of Dr. Roger Firestein. Not only does Dr. Puccio have Buffalo ties, but every one of the partners at the Foresight Company, we have all taken graduate courses in creativity in Buffalo. So we're big into Buffalo over here. So back to the dinner. I'm sitting at dinner with Dr. Dave, and to help him see his problem through a new lens, through the lens of foresight, I told him about our research discoveries. Specifically, I said, to solve a complex problem that needs new thinking, the kind of problem you have at the lab, it doesn't just require you to be smart or work hard. It's more specific than that. To solve a complex problem, you need to harness 4 really different types of thinking. Medical students, I suspect, get a lot of training in 1 or 2 of those types of thinking, but not all 4. Let me explain. When you solve a problem, you need to clarify to understand what's the right problem to solve. You get information, you gather facts, you understand best practices, what's happened before. And when you finish clarifying, you know the right problem to solve. Then it's time to ideate, to come up with ideas to solve it. So you clarify, then you ideate, but then you have to take the best ideas and develop a solution or plan. But that's not all. So you clarify and you ideate and you develop the solution, but now you have to take that solution and implement it. And when you put those 4 types of thinking together, you get a home run solution. Not only that, but you get a universal problem-solving process that's simple, scientific, and works like a charm. Really, there's only one problem with it. Users. That's us. Because when human beings try to clarify and ideate and develop and implement unconsciously, without thinking, without managing themselves, their brains unconsciously play favorites. So let's say we're on a team and we have a big challenge and we all want to help. So I like to clarify. So I grab on at Clarify and I'm starting to understand the facts and do a little research and ask questions. I want to make sure we're solving the right challenge. And while I'm busy clarifying, Roger grabs on and says, hey, I'd like to help. I've got an idea. And I say, what, Roger? No, this is not time for ideas. We're still clarifying the problem. And Roger says, oh, but I have another idea. And then Charity says, oh, wait, I want to help. And I could take those ideas and I could develop a solution. And I say, wait, what? No, you can't develop a solution. We're still clarifying the problem. And then Ken says, wait, did I hear solution? I'll take that solution and run with it. I'm going to implement it right away. And off he goes to implement the solution, leaving the rest of us trying to clarify and ideate and develop and thinking, wait, what happened to my challenge? That's what problem solving looks like on a bad team. Again, we're all good people. We're all good thinkers, hard workers. But when you put us all together, there's friction, there's resistance, there's conflict. Instead of wrestling the problem, we start wrestling each other. Our team has a thinking problem. Most teams have a thinking problem, and many of them are in thorough denial about the problem, but that's the first sign. Here's what's happening in those teams. People have thinking preferences. You can solve a problem starting at any point in the process. You can start by implementing, trying something and seeing if it works, and then going back and clarifying and ideating and developing. Or you can start by having an idea and trying it out and then clarifying and fixing it. It really doesn't matter the order in which you solve the problem. The challenge is when we try to solve the problem together, we really start to get in each other's way. So my favorite story that illustrates this, true story, of two friends, Babs and Elena, who graduated from business school together. And they ended up in the same job, in the same team, in the same big company in Chicago. And when they got to their new job, their boss said, look, I got to test you guys out. We have a problem that this team has had and tried to solve multiple times, but it still evades us. So I'm going to give you 3 months. So Babs and Elena were like eager to please. So they both prepared for the meeting, and Babs jumps into the meeting with Elena and says, Elena, I've got it. I was thinking about the problem and I got the big idea. It just came to me. I am so confident in this idea. I started typing up the presentation. We're going to be done in half the time. She's all smiles, and Elena sits back, hands folded, nodding her head. Well, that's very nice, Babs. I too have been working on this problem, and I went back and I found the file of the reports of the 5 teams that worked on this before. And in analyzing what data they had, I realized they couldn't have solved this problem because they didn't have enough data. So we're going to have to do some additional research. It will take us twice as long, but don't worry. I've written out this detailed schedule of exactly what we can do to meet our goal. You would have thought Elena had just canceled Babs's birthday forever. Babs had come in there with her big idea, ready for action. This was all good things that she thought. And the next thing she knows, Elena is like, oh no, we have to do more research. Oh no, here's a detailed schedule and we have to follow the whole thing. Everything Babs hates about work, didn't know what to do, but they were old friends. She was the godmother of the other one's child. They weren't going to ruin this friendship now. So they struggled through this challenge. They worked through the project. And when they finally threw it back over the transom to their boss, he was so impressed. He put them on another challenge together. Worst possible case scenario. And they wrestled through that one too. And it was uncomfortable and prickly, but you know, they were friends. So they just fought their way through it. And again, the outcome was outstanding. This went on for some time until Babs and Elena became known as the dynamic duo of problem solvers on that team. Together, they could really solve just about anything you threw at them. So one day, Blair Miller shows up to do a foresight workshop with the team. And usually the moment at which you hand out everyone's foresight thinking profile results, there's a hushed silence in the room. And everybody's sort of reading about themselves, studying the results. But in this case, 2 women burst out laughing. It was Babs and Elena. They were holding up their scores saying, look at the graphs. We're complete opposites. Sure enough, every time Babs had a high preference for something, Elena had a low one. And when Elena had a high one, Babs had a low one. When you put their scores together, it looked like the pattern on an Argyle sock. They were complete zigzag opposites. So they said, this explains everything. And as the managing partner of Foresight, I love the idea that Foresight explains everything, but certainly it does not. But what Foresight does explain is one very specific thing. It explains how you like to engage in a complex problem that needs new thinking. And it explains where your energy is likely to light up and drift, where you're likely to kind of lean in and say, oh, I love the research. Oh, I love the big idea, or I love planning the solution and the schedule, or I love making it happen. or not. And in the case of Babs and Elena, in every stage of the problem-solving process, clarify, ideate, develop, and implement, one of them had a really high preference. So when you put them together, and when they worked well together, which wasn't because they were good workers, it was because they were good friends, they produced amazing results. But what if you could do that not by dumb luck or because you had a deep and abiding friendship with somebody? What if you could do that on purpose with anyone in any team context? And that is the gift I would love to share with you, because this research really helps us understand how people think, why they think differently, and specifically what they need to feel like they're making a good decision, they're participating fully, their best thinking is getting contributed to the group, because that, letting a team solve a challenge together, that is a powerful source of not only good teamwork, but good connection. And I imagine that would be a very handy thing to have happen when you are working with patients. So I suspect it would be interesting to you guys to take a look at the foresight thinking profiles of a recent class at medical school at UB. So I prepped that for you. And what I'm going to show you is a graph that shows, again, not capability, not how good this class is at clarifying and ideating and developing and implementing, but where their natural energy is in that process. So before I do that, just for fun, I would love for you to type in chat, if you have access to it, what your best guess is of where these medical students are likely to have the most energy and focus. Would it be in clarifying the problem? Would it be in ideating? Would it be in developing solutions or a plan? Or maybe in implementing? There is no grade on this pop quiz, but it might be really interesting to do. And let me say also that I looked through I have 191 results in this data, in this graph. There are absolutely every type of thinker is represented. So there's actually not a right answer to this, but in aggregate, what we're going to look at is in aggregate, what are the overall scores? Okay, so we have some votes. I love this. We have votes for clarify and ideate. My father-in-law was a doctor, and that was his profile. He was a terrific doctor. Ideating, I suspect there are many of you who share that one. Clarify from Charity, implementing or all from Ike, and another clarifying. Okay, I'm going to show you what this is. Let me make sure I got the share working. All right. Can you see my screen? All right, so this is from last month. We gave the foresight thinking profile to 191 students at the UB Med School, and their results show the following. This is a measure that shows, again, preference to clarify, ideate, develop, or implement. And what you see in this graph is that in every column, it totals 191. But 89 of the students have a high preference to clarify. It's certainly, looking at the graph, the highest preference of this group. Almost half prefer to clarify. That's a big number in a group, and an unusual, not a number you'd see in the general population. So that's notable. Also, very few of them don't prefer to clarify. That's a very small number there. Now, ideate, totally different thing. Not too many of them are big fans of ideating. A lot of them, in fact, do not like to ideate. It's not their natural problem-solving comfort zone. But many do like to develop. And sort of in implement, it's kind of equal. Half like it, half don't. Mostly people are in the middle. So overall, the shape of this group, again, as an aggregate, is high clarify, low preference to ideate, medium high preference to develop, and kind of a neutral preference to implement. If I think of that in a patient in the context of working with a patient, here's the thing to know. And now I'm going to talk as though all of you liked to clarify, and I realize probably none of you actually fit that profile, and that's okay. But I will speak, because we're talking about medical school education at large, let me speak just first from the point of view of that clarifier. Doctors who like to clarify, humans who like to clarify, often want to talk about facts and research-based information. That, for them, is the grounding of intelligent problem solving. We were working with a group of doctors in North Carolina and talking about the importance of clarify and asking, like, why do you clarify? And one woman said, what? Why do I clarify? It would be absolutely irresponsible of me to solve a problem without clarifying. I mean, that she just couldn't even believe I asked that question. So she would naturally clarify both for herself, but also for her patient. So she'd be likely to tell the patient what problem she's trying to solve and the best practice for solving it and the research behind it. Now that works fine when you're talking to your teammates. In this case, our hypothetical teammate is a patient. That works fine if your patient shares that preference. If your patient also is most comfortable clarifying when they solve a problem, they're going to want to know, what problem are you solving? And what's the precedent? What's the best practice? You know, what do we know about this? And has the research been done? And has this all been thought through carefully? A patient who likes to clarify is going to be really comfortable with the doctor who likes to clarify because they think the doctor is so smart. They're answering all the questions the patient would have. However, not all patients do like to clarify. Maybe in the this 30% represents our general population, sort of what we find overall. About 30% of people have a preference to clarify. They may have other preferences, so the numbers on the bottom, spoiler alert, will not add up to 100. But about 30% of people do have that preference. But about 25% prefer to ideate. And people who like to ideate, they want to see the big picture. They want to use stories and metaphor and analogy to understand what's going on. That's where they lock in, or pictures. They may want to consider novel approaches, not look at best practices that have already been done, that have already been proven, that have already been researched. I mean, to you, that may be like, are you kidding? You want to look at novel approaches when we actually have research? But yes, they do. They naturally like the idea of maybe we can come up with something new and better and innovative. They may want to share their own ideas or their ideals, and they may want to follow their intuition. This is not exactly what doctors are taught to solve a problem or cure a patient. But if you have a patient that's like this, what do you do with them? That's coming later. Likewise, if you have a patient who wants to develop, whose preference is, I like to take ideas and then really evaluate and refine them to make the best possible solution, you may encounter them as very concerned about getting the thing just right. What helps them is having options. Is if you were to say, well, there are 3 ways we could go about doing this. There's this one, there's this one, there's this one. Let's walk through each one, look at the pros and cons, and evaluate which is going to be the best choice for you. And what are the criteria for evaluating success? You see, that's totally different than what the ideator person needs. The person who likes to develop wants to get granular with details, and they want to know the specific plan. And in the general population, about 20% of people like that and need that to feel like they are making a good decision. And finally, people who like to implement, and about 40% of people do, people who like to implement want to know the bottom line. You're the doctor, so what's going on? They want to know what needs to be done and by when, and what you'll do and what they should do and how they can get the whole thing done fast. For somebody who's trying to be the team leader and cure a patient, this is a lot of stuff to deal with. And I would love in a few slides to come back to this slide and have you all look at this and perhaps share stories and questions about what the implications are or what your experience of this might have been. But right now, I will tell you two stories. One is a story of me being the team lead and working with somebody who was my Argyle profile, someone my complete cognitive opposite. That would be my dad. My dad was a lawyer, really bright man, wonderful guy. And in 2019, he was in his 90s and his cognitive function wasn't what it used to be. So he had set up wills and trusts and things to take care of end of life. And my sister, my oldest sister, who likes to clarify and likes to implement, she was running point on the team. And she called me one day and said, Sarah, I can't get Dad to sign this document. This is a document he's asked for that he designed, but I brought it to him just to sign it, and he can't read it anymore. He can't take it in. He sits with it on his lap and he pages through it, but I can see he's not able to read it. And so he says, well, doll, let me take a look at this. Maybe I'll sign it tomorrow. And I went back the next day and he won't sign it. The same thing happens. And I don't know what to do. And I thought about my dad and what he needs to make a good decision. And what he needed was he needed to clarify and he needed to develop. As a lawyer, he was an estate planner, and his whole job was to clarify what people owned and to make a plan and develop a plan for how they were going to distribute it after they died. Perfect job for my father, who liked to clarify and develop. But in a situation where he was compromised and he could not make a decision in the way he was used to, he froze. He couldn't make a decision. So I thought, all right, Edith, why don't we look at this from the lens of foresight? We know that Dad needs to clarify. So why don't you do the clarifying? You read the document, you understand the document, and then you share with him exactly what's in it and let him ask questions about it until he feels like he's clarified what it is. And then for the develop part, give him some options. Say, Dad, we could do three things. We could sign it right now. You could, take time and evaluate it and make changes on it, or we can wait till Thursday and you can think through if this is the right thing and you could sign it on Thursday. And he said, okay, Dal, that sounds great. And Thursday afternoon, she called me and said, Sarah, he signed it. Like he was really comfortable with that. And to me, the ability to support my dad doing what he needed to do and intended to do and wanted to do, but could not do, this technology, this thinking technology, was incredibly powerful. And what a gift to be able to give it to your own dad. I will tell you one last story about a doctor who gave this gift to me and to Blair. When our son was born, our first son, Cole, who's fine now, 27 years later, when he was born, he was late. And so they sent me to the doctor to do a ultrasound, make sure everything was good in there. And the ultrasound technician was fussing around and she said, oh, you know about the kidney, right? The what? The who? I do not know about the kidney. Oh, she said, yeah, I'll get the doctor to come right in here. So the doctor came in and said, this child his left kidney is very large. Somehow something is going on where this kidney is really big and some intervention will need to happen. And then he started speaking in really complicated language and terms, and the words were as long as my child at that point, who was like a week old. And I felt really overwhelmed, very concerned. I didn't get what was going on. I didn't have the big picture. For me, my preferences are I like to ideate and I like to implement. And none of this was in my comfort zone. And then we got a specialist, Dr. Mizell, who drew me a picture. He said, this is a kidney, this is the ureter, this is the bladder. That's how it's supposed to work. Your son's kidney looks like that. It's too big. It's not supposed to be that big. And the ureter is closed at the top, closed at the bottom, and the size of a garden hose in the middle. So what we need to do is a surgery where we go in, arthroscopic, with a scope, cut the ureter on top and bottom, reattach it, but trim it. He said like bell bottom, like hemming a bell bottom and turning into a straight leg jean, and then reattach it both to the kidney and to the bladder. And I was like, I get it. I get it. He gave me the big picture. He told me what he was going to do, how he was going to implement it. So my preference to ideate, I got it. I see what's going to happen. I don't need to know any big words. I know what's happening. And my preference to implement, I know what he's going to do. And my first question is, what can I do? How can I be helpful to this team? Completely changed my sense of trust, my sense of ownership over the problem, and my ability to interact with the doctor in a way that was really powerful. So, I would love to ask you to turn this conversation really over to you and use this perhaps as a touchstone of surfacing stories or conversations where perhaps a similar thing has happened to you, either with a patient or with your medical team or with another expert. But I'm curious to know if this has been part of your practice or is a useful lens through which to see the work that you do.
Sarah, I'll just jump in and say that the data that you showed, Dr. Puccio Gerard did the debrief on Tuesday with the medical students, and it was really interesting when he asked, what their strengths were, where they thought burnout might happen. She cited Nagba Khan's research, and they were right on. And so it's terrific to be able to use this with the medical students. Thanks to the work that Dr. Mishra has done to get that in through the Art of Medicine. So yeah, so I think Ken Snyder's got his hand up there, and Archana has her hand up.
Hi, Archana.
Hi, Archana. I have three questions. I'll take one at a time, let others speak, and then come back to them. My first one is, again, I absolutely love the book, and I'm so glad Archana's and our team and Robert are helping expose our medical students to this. One thing that I have not seen us do is speed creative problem solving, almost like speed dating. And what do I mean by that? Whenever I've gone through this process, it's always been a time-consuming process to learn, but there's been a breadth. Time has never been a constraint. It's been let's work through the elements of divergent thinking and convergent thinking and explore and really pull everybody in. Often in medicine, we have complicated and complex problems that need to be solved in a very short period of time. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on how you can build the team to do speed type of practice work of immediate divergent, immediate convergent, immediate divergent, and learn from that. Because in our real world, it's not a boardroom, and we don't have that flexibility. And I think that when you push a team to its limit in that time constraint, you really see its weaknesses. And I'm wondering what your experience or thought is on that, or if there's a way offline we could explore something like that, because I think it's then much more applicable to medicine.
Yes and yes. That is such a great question. And here's the thing here's the good news about it. Creative problem solving is something we're all capable of instinctively. and something that we all do instinctively. It's just that we all do it with a different pattern. We all swing through it differently. In a group, under pressure, people will want to swing, will naturally swing through it their own way. And as I said, I looked at that. I looked all the way through those records for the 191 students. Even though they're sort of an aggregate shape, you got 15 different thinking profiles in there. So when you put people together and you put them under pressure, it's going to be your worst case scenario of using creative problem solving comfortably. The fastest way to make this work, and Raj, I'm sure you got great ideas on this too, but
you go.
I would say the fastest way to make this work is to surface what stage you're in. So in a group, to say, okay, let's clarify. You just declare it. You create the clarify space. What are we, what's our goal? One sentence. What's the key data that we know? 30 seconds. What else key data? Is there anything else we're missing? More data. And they're like, okay, so what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to stabilize? Are we trying to, figure out a prescription? Whatever. I'm way over my depth on that. But what problem are we trying to solve in a how-to thing? You can tackle that in minutes, with no post-it notes and no hand raising and somebody in the front of the room with a flip chart, as long as you declare the space. So we're clarifying now. All right, our goal, our data, do we have all the data? And what problem are we really trying to solve? Now,
I got it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and in some cases,
yeah,
you just don't need that many
process
ideas.
yeah,
If the data points you, you're good.
And where my mind is, and Dan Sheehan or Archana might be there, is we have clear team steps processes that we teach that are built on how we're supposed to work together in those various.
Oh, your sound just went out, Rob.
Just lost you, Ken.
Okay.
Sorry. I think there are ways that we can surface the problem solving methodologies into those team steps and methods to actually bring it explicitly to the surface. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. And that's going to be fun to explore.
Good. Well, that is a super interesting topic. You can always reach out to me about that, because I do think landing this thinking technology into a practice, that's where it's the most powerful. And it doesn't all come with post-it notes and flip charts and Roger Firestein facilitating and doing an incredible job. You just have to do it on the fly, but you can. And in my experience, if everybody, they did some research at IBM to see what's the best construct for a team? How do you school up a team, in this case, to produce innovative results? And what they found was putting together a genius team did not produce the best team. Putting together a remote team, a virtual team, was not really the best team. Putting together a team that was trained in, improv, what if, yes, and, was not the best team. The best team was the team that was self-aware, this is how I like to solve problems, and process aware. We have a shared language to solve problems, because then you can speak shorthand and say, we're not ideating right now, hold that idea. Or if you have an idea, instead of saying, you're the doctor, people are going to listen to you, instead of saying your idea, and it's just an idea, they don't know it's an idea. They think you're the doctor, so we should all be doing that. If you know yourself, you can say, oh, this is an idea, just an idea. We don't have to do it, but let me share it. That really changes the conversation and changes the teamwork. So again, there are really quick tricks and hacks to putting this in context that I think could allow for better problem solving and better teaming.
Sir, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, my head is coming up, my bobble. Yeah, declare the space, surface the space, divide it out that way. Fantastic. And thank you for your angle at coming at that. So yeah. And I think we have our good Dr. Gatewood over there with his hand up. So Robert, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you, Robert. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sitting waiting to see my doctor for my annual visit. That was fantastic. I just want to say that we used this technique in our office. We had trouble coming to agreements amongst our 15 physicians on some issues. And once we took the foresight and we understood each other, it was so much easier to discuss different issues and come up with ideas and solutions because we knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, and it was much more cordial that way.
That is great. Thank you so
Robert.
much for sharing that. I have to share, same in my office. You know, here we are all studying creative problem solving. We all have degrees in this. We all love, you know, everything about it. And we totally get at loggerheads about like, wait, no, I don't want to do it that way. No, what are you thinking about? And one of the most powerful uses of this thinking technology is to declare a breakdown and to be able to point to it as a breakdown in process instead of a breakdown in personality. Like, oh, you know what? I don't think we clarified. Or I see you want to develop. Okay, I can be in that space. You know, I work with an IT guy who loves to develop, and I don't. It's not my happy place. So he'll ask me a question. Do you think we should do it this way? And I was like, yep, sounds good. And then he won't do it that way. He's like, well, but we could do it this way, or we could do it this way, because he's trying to create options. Absolutely makes me tear my hair out until I remember, dope slap, oh, he needs to develop to feel like we're making a good decision. So I don't fall for that anymore. Now, if he says, you think this will work? I was like, well, it might work. What are other ways we could do it? And he'll show me 2 other ways, and they'll be like, no, but let's do it that way. It's so funny how we all continue to fall into our own patterns, even though we know. So thank you for that, Robert. That's so nice.
I was going to add that when I took it, I scored very, very low on clarifying and developing, and very, very high on ideating and implementing. So my pattern was a Z.
Yeah.
And that's my nickname now is Z. Robert gave me that.
You're definitely Z, Robert. You are definitely Z. Yeah.
Well,
we've
I
got Dan
suspect a lot of
Archant.
people here in
Yeah.
this group that are attracted to this conversation have a profile a lot like yours, Robert.
Sarah, you've got 3 others there. So Dan and Archant and Tony. So
Dan, Archant, and Tony, let's do it.
They're taking me back to my room. So that's that.
So-
But thanks a lot, Sarah.
Thank you, Robert.
So I've got Ashton here, who is a third-year medical student working with Archana with the humanities curriculum, and was there yesterday or the other day for Foresight. Ashton, you want to share your question?
I just had a quick question about if you've looked at this data across generations, because I was just discovered The Anxious Generation, the book that was like recently published by Jonathan Haidt, and I was just wondering, like a generation where their entire upbringing has been influenced by both the change in childhood as well as technology and smartphone based childhoods. I'm just wondering if, like, have you guys looked at this across generations? And because I was thinking about your CMO example, and I was wondering, like, about the people in his lab, were they from like a specific demographic? And I was just wondering if you'd looked at that.
That's a great question. And I have a small answer to it, research-based, which is that when we've done research to see, do preferences change radically over time? Not so much. So we ask people when they take it what their age is, so we can sort of judge, are older people showing up as a different thinking preference than younger people? And overall, at least when we did that study, it seemed not so much. However, I do think, you know, by and large, we say that preference doesn't change over time, but we're still working on that data. We're still open to research on that. You know, when you go through medical school, there is so much clarifying going on and so much developing going on. And, you know, I love that you guys are bringing ideation into that process as well. That is a brilliant addition to and balancing of the medical curriculum. And a lot of the work is clarifying and developing, but you don't want to get caught short without the ideation and the implementation too. So it's brilliant that you're doing the work you're doing. And I think in terms of the anxious generation, as you say, we have done a little bit of work and inquiry into mental illness and issues like anxiety and OCD and ADD, ADHD. There are some correlations there. I can certainly share that research with you, but the correlation about anxiety is a negative correlation with implementation. So people who like to implement don't have a lot of anxiety by and large, which is an interesting thing and perhaps a directional thing. Like if you get in an anxious space, doing something like getting into action, starting, trying, doing is perhaps a good antidote to that. Does that answer your question a little bit? Ask, yeah.
Sorry, I muted.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, you're so welcome.
I think we have Archana and Tony.
Okay.
Go ahead, Archnet.
All right.
Archana, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I'm sorry I came late to the meeting and I missed the initial part. But first of all, thank you for allowing me to use it for medical students. About a decade ago, when I first got introduced to Foresight, it was a blessing. It really helped me in my interaction with patients. And what you eloquently talked about at this point about, the quick assessment and awareness, what really appealed to me was that it is not just the self-awareness, but it's also awareness about the process. And that combination, I feel, is so powerful. So with patients, I realized, being again a driver with high preference for ideation and implementation, the patients who were clarifiers or developers, I could instantly see how I was not really satisfying their needs. And that led me, although it was painful because it wasn't my preference, I would then switch and try and meet their demands of giving them the different options instead of giving them the big picture and telling them, well, this is where we are, again, the clarifiers, where I had to go back and give them the data. And again, like you said, it's hard to do, and there were many slips, but because of that awareness, I could then apologize for the way I approached the problem. And that, with patience, I think I learned how to do it better. And then come to meetings, I realized that for some reason, and again, it was interesting when I saw the profile of the students being more clarifiers and developers. And again, even Nagma's study that showed that those who are, high clarifiers have higher burnout. And you can totally understand that because of the compressed time that you have with patients. It's very hard to satisfy your own needs to clarify in that time frame. But I guess just the acceptance of that can go a long way in making you feel okay with that shortened patient interaction time frame. But I just, once I experienced it, I really wanted to bring it to medical education, although it took a decade, because I feel it's such a powerful tool, not just for the awareness, but for the process, and to really make it much more painless than it sometimes is when you're working together with a team. So thank you again, and thank you for this really wonderful session.
You're so welcome. I will say that the thing over the years that has become clear to me that I really didn't know coming into this is that problem solving, which is what you do for a living and what I do for a living, is emotional. You know, we all think of it as intellectual, we all think of it as scientific, but at some level, there is an emotional thread that runs through it. And if you do not feel like this is the right way to solve the problem, you start losing trust in the process. If you not feel like your doctor is hearing you or getting you or giving you what you need, you lose trust in the process. If you don't feel like your teacher is meeting your needs, you lose trust in the exchange. And it's such a simple shift to understand, of course you lose trust. Of course there's an emotional, we are all wired like that. And if we can just acknowledge that in ourselves and others, man, that makes things better. Charity, you've been the world's most patient person holding It's all you now.
Well, I know we're getting to the top of the hour, and I've been just thinking about this. I have my profile up here. I'm also high implementer ideation. And in thinking about this in terms of a team, especially when you are leading a team, and say you have someone who's very high clarifier and gets stuck there. And I think as a person who has to try to develop leaders, what kind of tools or strategies do you suggest for leading teams to not get stuck in those phases, or even one person on the team who won't move past the clarifier or who won't move past the developer and start implementing? Is that when change tools come into play? And do you have you found any more successful than others?
I will give you a shameless plug. The most successful tool I've used to change that is the foresight thinking profile, so that people can see like, I like to clarify. I just think I think normally because it's the only way I know to think. And if people think differently than I do, I think they're doing it wrong. So suddenly the reflection like, we really actively think differently. And that when we can bring those types of thinking together, we're super powerful. But my type of thinking, if I like to clarify and I just like to clarify, is not sufficient to get that home run solution. So suddenly people know where to play and where to manage the emotional, like, I'm not ready to go forward. They can manage that because they know the problem is being solved effectively, even though it's not being solved the way they're most comfortable with it.
Right. So building trust with their teammates too.
And that's what this whole book, Good Team, Bad Team, is really about. It's about how to create a psychologically safe, trusting team where you're really drawing on everyone's best thinking and not shutting down the clarifier because they're always asking too many questions, but drawing out the clarifier when it's time. That's the art. That's the art of the thing, I think.
Perfect. Thank you.
I got to agree with you totally, Sarah, on that. We have 3 hands up, so we'll go for 5 more minutes after the hour if that works for you, Sarah. And if you need to jump off, go ahead. So let's go to Tony, then Ken, and then Sharon. So yeah, Tony, go ahead.
Thank you, Roger. I'd like to share this in the most positive light. It goes to Sarah's comments about maybe what she experienced personally through a process as a patient. I lost my wife in 2019 from a bilateral lung transplant at one of the world's largest healthcare centers in the world. Very difficult situation. And one of the challenges, and I think Sarah and Roger, you both know I'm certified in the Foresight instrument, and I've worked with companies on it. But one of the most challenging, and I really listened to Ken Snyder. And when Ken talks about very complex problem solving, you can imagine what a bilateral lung transplant is about, where multiple systems are involved. And you've got multiple disciplines involved with this. But it is one of the most challenging experiences for the patient, especially one that knows all of this, right? And knows how the difference between a good team and a bad team. And what I experienced is that you can't problem solve smack in the middle of a problem where you're not looked at in the sense of the knowledge that they know, but I'm very highly trained and skilled in the cognitive pieces of it, that I found myself helpless as a patient advocate, very helpless in that kind of experience. So if that is any support to you doctors and medical professionals, is that, yeah, the process is hard to learn, but listen, it's very worth it that you could bring the patient involved in that process and keep them just equally as involved as, because you don't know what their background is. You don't know what their skill set is. Because you're so, like Ken says, you're so quick decisions that have to be made on the spot at very quick periods of time. So I just add that piece.
Thanks,
in
Tom.
a very positive light, because this is a very important conversation.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'm going to go to Ken and then to Sharon. Thanks, Tony.
Anthony, I'm sorry for your loss, and in our thoughts and prayers, and thanks for bringing that forward. That really focuses the why around the conversation and why this is so important, and brings the empathy component to this. Isn't just a problem solving. This is our friends, neighbors, community, and thank you for that. I think it gives it a whole nother dimension of why this is so important.
Can I just add one little quick anecdote to that?
Please.
It affected my entire family.
Sure.
I have two daughters that were involved in this, and I am still trying to repair the relationship with my younger daughter that is now 42 years old, has two children, and I have not seen them for 5.5 years. And that was the healthcare scenario that you can imagine, where I was pulled off of power of attorney and it was put into my children's hands. So you can imagine the issues that were there. So just to add that, Ken, I apologize.
Not at all. Again, in my thoughts and prayers, and I pray in the future that there'll be some resolution, and I'm sure there will. All we can do is love them. All we can do is love them, and life.
I have total belief it'll happen, Ken.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think this builds off of your component, and it's probably very obvious to you, Sarah, but I want to say it because sometimes it isn't obvious. Healthcare has two phases to it. One of the main ones is that we're asked to be actors or actresses. We are on stage for the vast majority of our day. And then there are down times when the team off stage has time to work and build. And I think without recognizing that, we think there's only one mode that we need to work the team in, because there's a very different way that we need to go through this session in front of people or when we're on stage, and a very different method to do it off stage. And so again, I wonder, as you're teaching actors or actresses, if you use different tools than you would a boardroom. And what I think you need to realize when you're dealing with physicians is you need to bring both to the table. And we also have to recognize that when someone goes out of their comfort zone of thinking, it adds strain and stress. And so what's happening to people is when they are needing to flip throughout the day, it is adding to exhaustion and strain. And unless we recognize it and give them that decompression component, it will just build and build and build. And so there's a match to the patient element and a match to your comfort zone that we often don't think about, that I think you're helping me recognize and realize.
I love that. That is nothing I've looked into, and I think that's really intriguing and could be really valuable to sort of dig into. We talk about a cognitive commute, work that you do that's right in your comfort zone. It's like a short commute. And there's research that shows that the length of commute sort of equates to overall sense of well-being. So if you are constantly having to go outside your thinking comfort zone to address a patient need or solve a problem or do the work you do, whether you're on stage as the actor or offline solving the problem, it is exhausting. That's where burnout sort of comes in. And having that awareness. Self-care is easier because you know what you're missing and what you need and where you sort of get reinvigorated. But I think what you're looking at is new. I've not heard that discussed before. I think it's really intriguing. Thank you for sharing it.
And then we'll end with Sharon. So
Sharon.
thanks for your patience, Sharon.
Hi. So I'm about halfway through your book, and let me just say how much I love it. It is just a breath of fresh air right now. But I noticed you didn't talk about the integrators. That is where I feel like my thinking falls. And this book has given me so much clarity and how I can talk to the different ways people think and try to identify that. Because I'll tell you right now, the generational piece to this is really important. And I feel like, you know, I have 2 adult children and they're both in different generations. So it's really kind of wild watching them navigate right now. And my 27-year-old, she is so empathetic, and her personality, like she's big into the idioms with she's like, I'm a this and a wing of that. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, but I just want to know how you're thinking through things and how you're doing things. Like, I don't want to feel it. I want to think it. And so so for me, like, how would if I am an integrator, because like I said, I want to finish your book, but how do I take this and work off the generational personality traits that people are really, really trying to own and conceptualize in the work that they're doing?
Well, first of all, thank you for reading the book and for loving the book. I really, really wanted to write a book that was really readable and relatable, because this stuff is so abstract, but how cool if you could really do it.
You did it. You did it.
But your question about the integrator is great. An integrator in the foresight construct is somebody who has equal preferences to clarify an idea and develop and implement. And you'd think, oh, they won the lottery. Like, that's the perfect profile. And what we discover is that profile isn't any more perfect or imperfect than any other profile. It's just distinct. And it's distinct because that profile tends to want to make sure everything is covered, every part of the process is covered, but also all the people are covered, like that everyone and everything is heard from and taken into account. So there's sort of a sort of circling of people and process that goes on for people who like to approach things with equal preferences. Does that seem like a fair description?
It does.
And there are about like 17 to 18% of people have that profile. So it's a pretty common profile.
I just feel like, you know, and it's really funny, as I've gotten older, I feel like I'm neurodivergent in the way that I think about things. And like I said, this book gave me so much clarity, and it was like a roadmap for me now going forward, because I was able to I was giggling halfway through it as I was reading it, because it just makes so much sense. And I'm really happy to be part of this and to hear your talk today. It is definitely something we need in medicine. And I was thinking about what Dr. Snyder was talking about. I feel like nurses and physicians change so much throughout our career because of the experiences that we have with our patients. And, you know, whether they're good or bad, they all affect us, right? And I feel like it does change our thinking. It does change how we approach things going forward, and we're constantly evolving. So I'm really curious, like, as you're doing research on how long, because now that you've done this with the residents, it would be nice if you could follow them and then 5 years into their career, redo this test and see if they stayed where they were or if they're changing because of the areas that they've gone into work. And like Ken said, like, you have so many stages every day that you're on, and it's pretty important, like, coming into that headspace when you're dealing with families and patients and real problems that, like, you don't want to rush through, but you have to rush through, right? Like, I say it all the time in medicine, we hurry up and wait. And it's so frustrating for the families and for the teams involved, because sometimes there's not great answers and we just have to do what we think everyone agrees is the best way to go forward. And so, I don't know, I'm really curious to see how this is going to evolve with your research.
Well, thanks to
Thank
Shauna, who really set us up to do a pre and post test. So that was brilliant. That the test that just happened, the assessment that was just taken, the results you just saw are the beginning of that research. So
Right.
thank you again, Arjana, for bringing it in.
Well, and thank you all for being here today. Sarah, if you and David will stay on for just a minute afterwards. So fantastic. Round of applause for Sarah. Fantastic. You knocked it out of the park. We'll plan on our next BSCME meeting on September 26th. Sharon, great to see you. It's been a while. Ken, I'll be in touch with you. I'm buying you coffee, Dr. Snyder. And Robert, I hope everything goes well with your doctor. And Tony, we're our thoughts, prayers with you and your family. Archana, dear, see you soon. And thank you all so very much for being here. We're going to keep these things going. And thank you for being a part of it. This makes my day. So
This is so great, Raj.
Isn't it great? Isn't it great? So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you on the 26th of September.
Thanks, Roger. Have a
You're
great day,
welcome.
everybody.
Okay, Ken, I'll talk to you later, Ken. So